was hard not to be excited when Cultic was first announced. Developed by Jason Smith and published by 3D Realms, its first trailer made it clear that this was a game positioning itself as a spiritual successor to the legendary monolith classic, Blood. Soon after, fans got their hands on a pair of strong demos, which only intensified the hype. And now, just in time for Halloween, the first half of Cultic, Chapter 1, has been released. And oh boy am I excited to talk about it. Is Cultic destined to be a Halloween favorite? In this video, we're gonna find out. Now let's go live again. So the best place to start with Cultic Chapter 1 is to explain what it isn't. And what it isn't is an early access release. That's right, Cultic is actually going for an episodic release model. We have the first episode, Chapter 1, with a second, final chapter planned for the future. I'm sure some of you are asking, well, Kirk, what's the difference? It seems like it's still being put out like every other early access shooter. Well, the first big difference is on your wallet. On average, early access first-person shooters are priced around 15 to 20 bucks. Pay that once and you are guaranteed future updates for that game and eventually the full retail release. All the while, crossing your fingers, the rest of the game turns out alright and is released in a timely manner, if at all. With Cultic, you are paying $9.99 for the first chapter. That's it. 10 bucks for 10 levels and then some. Chapter 2 will be released as paid DLC with a similar price point. And 3D Realms did confirm with me that Chapter 2 will be at least the same length as Chapter 1, which is around 4 to 5 hours, and will be discounted for those who have already purchased Chapter 1. The other big difference is that this is not some prologue chapter or a bunch of levels with some work in progress areas walled off and only the first part of the arsenal. No, this is a full campaign. It might only have 10 levels, but it features a beginning, middle, and an end. And it also has the full 10 weapon arsenal. Sure, there will likely be updates and maybe additions to it in the future, but otherwise, this is a finished product, not a taste of gameplay with a promise attached. Along with the campaign, Chapter 1 also includes the survival mode, essentially a wave-based horde mode. There are currently 3 maps available for it, and I assume 3 more will come with the Chapter 2 release. Alright, so now that that's out of the way, let's actually talk about the game. Taking place in the early 1960s, you play as a detective in the town of New Grandwell, who has been investigating a string of homicides plaguing it. However, after allegations of misconduct, your character is removed from the case. This pushes our hero to take the case on himself outside the law. Little does he know, the evil forces at work are already one step ahead of him. After waking up dazed and confused in a mass grave, you discover the woods and mountains of New Grandwell have been occupied by a sadistic, supernatural cult. And with nothing but a hatchet and a whole lot of athleticism, our detective ventures into the night to pop some hooded heads. Cultic's narrative is purposefully vague in order to create a sense of mystery, challenging those who are interested in it to piece it together themselves from clues found within the environment. Not unusual for a first-person shooter, but this storytelling to me was more reminiscent of survival horror. You'll find documents and memos throughout shedding light on what's going on, but the real key bits of story come from the journals of a private investigator, looking into the disappearance of a young girl. Cultic's story will remind you of other prominent tales in both horror and FPS gaming, but it is well told, or shown, I should say. I think the developer was smart in where they placed visual clues and documents to keep players on the story breadcrumb trail. And what's nice, and likely due to the episodic nature of this release, is this is actually a complete narrative with what I felt was a satisfying conclusion. That might hint at what's to come. It's good stuff. Cultic's graphics aim to recreate the look of mid-90s build engine classics, like Duke, Shadow, and Blood. And indeed, Cultic does a brilliant job mimicking that 2.5D engine, adding in a few modern bits of flair. Further leaning into the technological inspiration, QB voxels make up the more complicated models, like vehicles, machinery, furniture, and the unfortunate victims of the night. And I thought these were a lot of fun to peek at. Looking at this game, the phrase that comes to mind is rusty retro. And what I mean by that is that not only does this game create a convincing old school look, it takes it a step further by, for lack of a better term, dirtying up the image, as if we were playing Cultic on hardware that wasn't quite ready for it. You have the screen dither that gives everything a sort of ethereal haze, there's heavy pixelation in the textures and sprites, and color compression that crushes the darker colors, giving the game a more blotchy, gritty, monotone look. I made mention in my first impressions video for Cultic that the graphics remind me of the visuals of the Game Boy Color and Advance, specifically games ported to those systems from more powerful hardware, as if Blood itself was ported to one of those handhelds. It's a low-fidelity approach that I believe beautifully conveys a particular time of gaming, a style of game, and from an artistic standpoint, greatly contributes to the overall spookiness of the experience. Also, I have to shout out the skyboxes. Can you criticize a game for having too beautiful of a skybox? Cause this was borderline distracting. If these old school touches aren't exactly your flask of whiskey, you have the option to turn them off, which cleans up the image and enriches the color palette. And it does look quite nice, although personally, I prefer the grungier retro look. Audio follows a similar trend. Sound effects are purposefully on the low fidelity side, with audio crinkles, pop, and fuzz that also greatly contributes to the horror of the game. Plus, there's a pretty broad range to the soundtrack. The music can lend an atmosphere of moody, sinister, patient evil, but it also features plenty of guitar riffing action tracks, as well as tracks that convey a feeling of drama and tragedy, with confident yet solemn hits on a keyboard. And a great touch is that a good amount of the songs have a more contemporary sounding variation, primarily used for action-intensive scenes, giving you an energy boost as you head into the ultra-violent fray. For a media junkie such as myself, Cultic's visuals vividly brought to mind images from some of my favorite horror classics, from both gaming and film. The dithered atmosphere, crumbling infrastructure, and sound effects transported me to the foggy streets of Silent Hill. The mountainous canyons, rickety walkways, and backwoods terror returned me to the cursed village of Resident Evil 4, and by extension, American horror classics like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Evil Dead.
Workshed.
The elements of inspiration here are of course great for nostalgia, but here I think it's a powerful example of remix, in taking the familiar and well-loved and morphing them together in such a way to make them feel fresh and original. The atmosphere of this game is eerie and disturbingly dark, like mass graves lit by red truck light dark. Partway through this game, I was a little surprised to admit to myself that, yeah, this is kind of scary. No, it wasn't scary to the point of making my anxiety shoot through the roof, but there were some moments here and there that got me a little nervous. And yeah, I wasn't really expecting that. It's a testament not only to this game's presentation, but also to the developer going out of their way to build tension through the level design. For me, I think it was the enemies that hit me most in the spooky bone. Initially, I had a false sense of security with them because you start off fighting the cultists, which is like a joyous reunion with an old friend. Oh, the cultists! From Blood! Hey! Look, there's tan robes, dark robes. Oh, the dark robes have machine guns, and they throw dynamite, and they're kinda goofy. Oh, such a great throwback. But then after the cultists, every enemy I came across, I was like, oh, I don't think I like you. No, stay back, stay back. There are some unsettling designs here, and they definitely caught me off guard. Now, just to let you know, I'm being very careful how I cut this footage so I don't spoil any of them. But what I will say is that a lot of these baddies feel like they belong in old internet creepypasta. Of course, after several hours of massacring these burlapped horrors, the scare factor does diminish. But it doesn't change the fact that past the cultists, this is a fresh, freaky, and original set of FPS baddies, at least in terms of their visual design, and it's going to be fun seeing other players' reactions to them. Cultic is an FPS that attempts to balance fast-paced mobile arena shooting combat with the more tense, exploratory pace of a survival horror game, and succeeds for the most part. Shooting is snappy and explosive in every way you can think of, and the game revels in stylish brutality. Slick, split-second kills and well-placed headshots are often accompanied with some slow-mo splendor, like a pat on the back to let you know you done good. And I have to say, these might be the best 2D sprite headshots I've ever seen in this style of game. Mechanically, it's a smooth, satisfying play with the type of shooting that feels like a simple pleasure. Longtime Blood fans will be more than comfortable slipping into this game, especially considering Cultic is more forgiving with its mechanics. A little more on that later. There's some nice technical details and tricks to the combat too. Enemy hatchets and dynamite bundles can be shot out of the sky, and your own dynamite bundles can be kicked right back to you. Lanterns can be shot or thrown to create a fiery death trap, and if you time it right, you can kick an enemy's head clean off their shoulders. But it's kinda tricky to pull it off. In general, this is a game that encourages you to try stuff and mess around, like throwing some explosive barrels down a slope to get the jump on some baddies, or smashing up a toilet and jibbing someone with the seat. Okay, in this light, the game can be quite comical. And those with shooter tastes that lean more contemporary will appreciate defensive maneuvers like dashing and sliding. I'll be honest though, I kinda kept forgetting I had the dash ability. Somewhat to do because it's a little weak feeling, but also because I was never in combat situations that really pushed me to use it. Just having always run on was enough to weave me around most danger. But sliding will help you dodge some bullets and take cover from the more trigger-happy enemies. Your arsenal is robust and made up of the usual suspects of FPS implements. Naturally, a few of the weapons are throwbacks to Blood's arsenal. The double-barrel shotgun, for instance, like Blood's, allows players to shoot each barrel individually, leading to some devilish decapitation. And the alternate allows both barrels to be fired at once, which is strong against the tougher enemies and liquefies the lower ones. Dynamite bundles are of course here too. Like in Blood, after they are lit, a direct impact will lead to an immediate explosion, perfect for crowd control. The player also has the option to throw them out unlit to create traps. Compared to Blood, chucking out dynamite is a lot easier to do, perhaps a little too easy. And since the game is more than generous with the dynamite pickups, along with most ammo in this game, it's likely players will get a lot out of them. Honestly, just about every problem in Cultic can be solved with dynamite. Same can be said about the Molotov cocktails with fire that spreads faster than Sonic on Adderall. And if the stacks of dynamite and Molotovs weren't enough, then the grenade launcher should do the trick. Past that, the pistol and SMG carry their weight as reliable damage dealers, and hatchets are melee weapons worth falling back on, as they can be thrown to decapitate. Across the board, weapons feel fantastic and are fun to use, and most bring something to the table, providing players a lot of ways to dispatch enemies. As you progress, you'll have access to workbenches, where, with collectible weapon parts found throughout levels, you can upgrade various attributes of your weapons, like fire rate, attack power, and grant a few of them their alternate fire attacks. The one weapon I found some issue with was the lever action rifle. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it. In fact, the rifle is highly accurate, has incredible range, and a single shot can pop the head off of a good amount of enemies. But the thing is, the lever action is too good. Too good to the point that you can get pretty cheesy with it. Once again, the range and accuracy with this weapon is impressive, and yes, it is designed for players to sneakily take out enemies from a distance. And enemies can fire right back at you from that distance as well if you happen to miss. However, in the earliest of levels, eagle-eyed players can find vantage points where they can use the rifle to smoke enemies clear across the map. Yeah, you might have to squint a little, but it's very doable and can help you take a bite out of upcoming skirmishes and ambushes. Now, on one hand, good on the player for giving themselves the advantage. On the other hand, I'm not totally sure this was the developer's intention. The other thing too is that because the lever action is so effective, when you eventually get the FG42, which is a proper sniper rifle with a scope, it ends up feeling like a redundancy. Sure, both these weapons have unique attributes, primarily with their alternate attacks, but past that they feel very similar and pretty much accomplish the same thing. It's just too easy to take advantage of the rifle, and nerfing it would not be the worst idea, decreasing its range or perhaps giving it some sort of fall off past a certain distance, so pulling off crazy shots like this is a lot harder. Level design in this game is a fun hybrid of non-linear looping old-school shooter design with claustrophobic survival horror sensibilities. Levels are quite expansive, giving players a lot of ground to explore and more options than they realize to take on challenges. Interspersed throughout them are these focused and rather intense sections of survival horror exploration, like navigating the bowels of a ship or finding your way through a dark cave. These are mainly here to scare the player, and I found them to be effective and organically built into the levels. You also have some survival horror item fetch puzzles, like navigating a dark sprawling forest, trying to find a lever and crank to lower a drawbridge, all the while being chased by something. What I found really impressive though is how Cultic presents these open levels and finds ways to naturally section them off, funneling you into intensive shooting arenas. So you have the sense of freedom that a more open world provides, but also the focus of a linear FPS level. It's superb. Unfortunately, you will notice some glitchy pathfinding here and there from enemies who typically get stuck in doorways and low-level obstacles. It's most prevalent with the larger enemy types, and there were quite a few fights where I won the day simply because a large, tough enemy got stuck. Hopefully the developer can clean that up in the future. One downside of this release is that there's no New Game Plus option or any way to go back and replay specific levels. This is something I really feel the game should have, so players are able to go back and get the chance to fully upgrade their weapons if they didn't have the opportunity to do so the first time around. And selfishly, level selection screens are an influencer's best friend. By this point of the review, I think it's clear I'm very fond of this game. However, I do have a last overall critique of Cultic, and it's in very subjective territory, and largely has to do with looking at Cultic as a spiritual successor to Blood. So, take it as you will. Blood is an amazing shooter. It's also a real son of a bitch. Anybody tackling its harder difficulties for the first time, like Extra Crispy, will likely find it a grueling, punishing experience. Largely for the difficulty of the enemies, but also because these difficulties really require the player to understand the mechanics of their weapons and their alternate fires, all of which have a learning curve, some more than others. Unlike Cultic, you're not going to be able to go into Blood and be able to bullseye cultists with dynamite. You have to get a feel for it first. You have to learn its arc. And there is certainly a right time to use each of its weapons, and you'll have to gain an instinct for that. Basically, Blood is a game you have to get good at, but when you do, it's incredible. Working up to the point to where you can demolish rooms on Extra Crispy is a whole new level of FPS nirvana. To put it simply, it's very rewarding to conquer Blood. Cultic doesn't really have that aspect to it, that sense of reward. Its guns really don't have much of a learning curve, and while there are optimal weapon choices, the player typically has tons of options to get through the toughest sections. Basically, the mechanics make it so it's not hard to be a badass in Cultic. Now, I'm not saying Cultic is easy. This game will be challenging for all skill levels. And I am certainly not saying it isn't fun. Frankly, Cultic is some of the most fun I've had with a shooter this year. But personally, I do think this game tips the scales a little too much in the player's favor, and for me, it put a little bit of a damper on my satisfaction with it. I didn't expect Cultic to be as punishing as Blood, but I wish it pushed me more to learn it and be skillful with it, like Blood did. Now, once again, that is a very subjective take. There are going to be people that love the fact that this game is not as punishing as Blood. There are going to be people who have never played Blood and won't care because they're having too much fun with this. And there will be people that argue that while this is inspired by Blood, it does more to chart its own identity and shouldn't be held to its standards. All of that is valid. But if I had one suggestion going forward with Chapter 1's updates and Chapter 2, it's that I would like to see the scale tip in the other direction. I think this game can be tweaked to push players more, to push them to be more skillful, mindful about how they play, and make Cultic more of an uphill battle, in hopes of making it a more rewarding experience. It doesn't have to be extra crispy, but a little more char on this one might be just the thing. Cultic Chapter 1 is solid from top to bottom. While I have my critiques, I think this is a beautiful and immensely enjoyable shooter, and it got me taking some nice trips down horror memory lane. While it may not totally scratch my blood itch, its campaign is a joy, full of ridiculous spooky fun. I think shooter fans of all types will find a lot to like here. Plus, it's the perfect sort of game for Halloween. Now the real question is, what does Jason Smith and 3D Realms have in store for Chapter 2? I'm eager to find out. What are your thoughts on Cultic? Be sure to let me know down in the comments.
If you dug the video, please be sure to subscribe, like, share, and smack that bell. If you want to come say hi, my Discord is linked below, along with my affiliate links. I'm Kirk, and thank you for watching this video. Stay safe out there.